It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, we have with us although I said us, and I'm just saying me, but anyway, I have with us my co-host, Andy Grabner. Andy, today's a very special podcast. Do you know why?
I have no clue. Every podcast is special for me.
Well, it's the one and only podcast that we're recording today, so that makes it special.
Yeah,
I got nothing else. I literally thought about that for about 5 minutes before joining the call, and that's the best I could come up with today.
Was that the only thing on your calendar today? Is that what you're saying?
It's the only podcast on the calendar today.
Okay, yeah. How many podcasts? What else do you do besides Pure Performance?
Pick my nose.
Oh, you pick my nose. Yeah, that's a good one.
Hey, it's the election day special too.
That's
Over here
true.
in the States, it's election day, and everywhere you look, it's just going to be people talking and speculating. Oh, maybe he's up 2 points, maybe down 2. Oh, frustrating today to get through because it's just it's all speculation.
Do you think it's a lot about metrics and who in the end gets closest to the goal?
Yes, but I will say, unlike performance engineers and people in SRE and observability, it's about metrics, but it's about trying to fill the time, making up stories to fit them for entertainment purposes, where I think people in our field are really doing hardcore work and trying to change and make the world better. And there's a special group of people who've come up recently in that realm, within the last, building out of the last 10 years, who've really been making an impact and a difference for everybody's lives. Even if you don't know it, you're on the receiving end of great performance because of the hard work and dedication of these people. Who might they be, Andy?
Who might they be? Maybe we have somebody on the line today that could fill us in a little bit. Okay, let's stop with this. It was a good one, but yeah. Welcome to the show, James. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry that you had to endure the last 3-4 minutes where we tried to be funny, but we always tried. And eventually, in a couple of years from now, we will be funny, hopefully.
Yeah, I just saw a scowl on his face the whole time.
Yeah.
So. It's just good learning. We're not failing. We're just learning fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, James, thanks for being here. The two of us, we met at DevOps Days Boston, where I saw you co-present with Steve McGee, who has been on our show in the past. And some may know you, some may not know you. So for those that don't know you yet, could you quickly give an introduction who you are and what do you do?
For sure. So I'm James Brookbank. I look after a team of cloud solution architects at Google. I'm not talking on behalf of Google today, though, just don't tweet my boss and say like, hey, I said something like that. It's not that kind of talk. I'm the other half of the Steve McGee partnership in that Steve has spent 15 plus years as an SRE at Google and knows how how all the unicorns are made. I've spent 20 odd years in enterprises like banks, large companies with sort of difficult scale problems, but really not tech startups, basically. And so one of the things I try to do working at Google now is bring that expertise and talk about things like reliability. We talk a lot about sort of SRE, but really it's the wider reliability concerns with cloud customers and, try and move the state of the art forward in this area, not just for the tech companies, right? For everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's also what I enjoyed so much about when you were on stage in Boston. You actually said, right, not everybody's looking up to Google, but as you said, they are one of the unicorns, but not everybody is like Google. And that could also explain a little bit why people get really excited about what they hear, but then they're falling short on actually delivering, right? How can we apply what we learn from the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world, and why, what can we learn? But then people are excited, and then the kind of the excitement stops somewhere and nothing materializes. And you have your presentation, SRE in the Enterprise. There's also a great book. I think you actually have it available for free, if I'm not mistaken.
You can download it from the SRE Google website, and that's it's the best bit about it. We made it very short. It's 50 pages. It's designed to be like executive friendly. So, you can read it on the plane, you can give it to your boss and be like, hey, you don't have to read the full SRE book. Like you can later, but maybe start with like the Cliff Notes and just sort of try some of these things first, basically. So we deliberately try to make that accessible. It's not like all of the books we publish. It's not a hard and fast set of rules. It's not designed to tell you must do this and then you'll be SRE. It's just lessons that perhaps we've learned and customers have learned in these spaces, and we're just trying to share those things.
Now, we will add the links to the podcast description. So, folks, if you're listening to this, then the link is going to be there, and then enjoy the 50 pages read. I've enjoyed it twice already on two plane rides, which was nice. I have a couple of questions actually for you, because
Please.
Please, yeah, thank you. We've been talking about DevOps and SRE and SLOs for several years now, right? We had people like Gene Kim on a couple of years ago when the kind of DevOps became really popular. And then we had on the SRE side, where we must have had at least 10, 15 different people that are SREs. Just the last episode was with Diana. She is an SRE lead at a large bank in Canada, and kind of her journey into SREs. What I would like to know from you is, what advice do you give when you talk with these enterprises, when they come to you? What do you tell them to actually really apply SREs, and what are the things they should apply? What maybe they should not apply? What are some of the best practices?
Yeah, and there's obviously a lot to this. So I think the first step is, often people want a single lever or a silver bullet that they can do. They're like, you know what, I really need to do this. It's very important for my business. Tell me the one thing that I can do to make this happen. And I think what we found is like that's not going to happen. Like it's the same with a lot of these areas. The same with DevOps, Agile. You can't really do just one thing and expect quite serious changes. And we wouldn't do that in any other part of our lives. Like we wouldn't expect that to just be like, well, I just changed this one thing, but I've got like outsized performance. I think though the other side is we do, I think, know a relatively small number of things that make like high impact changes in this space. So, one of the things that we talk about quite heavily in the book is we perhaps overestimated how much of SRE and reliability concerns were technical, and how much were not, how much were part of the social and team structures of organizations, of the culture of organizations. And I think we found a lot of overlap between the DevOps initiatives and SRE initiatives, where we're saying, if you do have a generative culture, if you do have an ability to raise incidents safely, you have psychological safety within your company, you're highly likely to form learning loops. And when you have incidents, they're going to be learning opportunities. You'll make things better, and you'll have this sort of positive cycle of reinforcement for your operations teams and generally for your company. If you're not doing that, like buying tools or implementing like practices on their own, it's not that they're not effective, but they're not providing that sort of 10x that people are looking for. They're really sort of fighting against the grain of a lot of these things. Just to talk about like the culture piece as well, I think one of the things that people often get frustrated about is, could you tell us like, the culture to like, is it ping pong tables or like, foosball? Like maybe if we put the free food in, like that's the culture you're talking about. And it's not. And then we do go into some detail on this in the book and some of the talks we've had where, Google has published guidance, but you can look at, say, the Western model for sort of culture and say, actually, culture means things like psychological safety, like dependability.
Yeah.
If you do those things, you have those capabilities, you're much more likely to get better SRE outcomes and DevOps outcomes, and you'll probably get like the free food as a result of that. Like it will be emergent from that culture. Like all these things will come from doing those things correctly. As opposed to the other way around, where you're like, if I get enough foosball tables in, like suddenly the developers will be doing this, right? Like flip that the other way around, and also don't overestimate how simple some of these cultural changes are. Like in terms of like just just paying attention to incidents, using retrospectives as learning opportunities instead of saying, well, we've got so many incidents and I guess there's nothing we can do about it. Like, that's really the most important place to start. Like, build those learning loops and start small. So there's more, but I guess that's the key one that seems to drive like the best behaviors.
I'm imagining an office full of desks that are actually foosball tables. So you work on like every single desk being a foosball table. That'd be, yeah, come work here. It's great. How do I put my laptop up?
If we could do that, if that was the thing, then we would have done it, right? Like, if we knew that one thing that would, one lever we could pull that would make it happen. But it's not as simple as that. But it's easier than it sounds. Like, the culture changes aren't, they're not expensive, but they are challenging.
I'm just looking at your slides that I think from SRE Con EMEA that you've just given as well. I think
a couple of weeks ago, we talked about some of these items.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating when I read the book, in the book you make a comment and kind of say, the history of kind of software engineering a little bit, where now in the world that we live in, reliability also becomes a differentiator, obviously, right? I think you cannot always compete maybe with the best user experience, but you can compete with having the best reliability. Like, you're always on. Like Google has been, it's known for the Google search is always there, right? And that's a differentiator. Now, on the flip side of this, looking at slide number, whatever 5 or 6 it is, it's a great point. It says reliability is not always the most important thing. I think you also need to be then very careful on where, I guess, it makes sense to invest in these concepts and where it does not yet maybe make sense. Are there maybe some pointers that you can give on when is it a good time to really focus on better reliability? Maybe at some point where it doesn't make sense right now. Yeah.
And I think it's a crucial piece, because one of the things that I think Google has made fairly public, but perhaps not everyone has sort of seen this, is that we do not have SRE for every service. Like, that's a deliberate decision inside Google that many smaller services that are non-critical do not require SREs. They benefit from the SRE ecosystem. They benefit from our sort of dirt testing, like disaster recovery testing, that kind of stuff. But we don't have it for every service, and we deliberately try and focus our SRE efforts on the very high reliability services. So, sometimes when I have this conversation with customers or other third parties and say, like, what are you trying to do with SRE? And they're like, oh, every service we've assigned some SREs. I'm like, you can do that, but that's not really how it's done, say, at Google or other companies who are following this model. And do we have like a nice, easy matrix decision of which services should be SRE supported? It's very fluid. Like, it's not a well-described process, but it kind of falls into like 3 main categories. And we did talk about this a little bit at SRE Con EMEA. So ask yourself if it is a product differentiator for your service. Like, if you're not sure, it probably isn't. Like, if your service can be down for a few hours and, it's not really expensive to do so, have a think about this. Like, sometimes we see systems where, like, leave booking, people are like, hey, our leave booking system's down. That's probably okay for a few hours. Like, people can book holiday, like, or just let their boss know. Like, you don't need to have this critical 5.9 service for it. Like, pick your battles in that. Is there an existential risk for your service? Like, sometimes we speak to banks, and I've had this experience at banks I've worked at where they're like, this service absolutely must operate. Like, it has to complete something by the end of the day, or we'll be speaking to a regulator. If you have a critical service like that, you'll immediately have access to funding and SREs, right? Like, people will understand the existential nature of those services. So this helps you like identify those critical things. And I think the final one is scale. And one of the key reasons that Google did SRE and where it becomes, I think, very important is when you're trying to scale. If humans can't manage the infrastructure involved, you'll immediately start adopting SRE practices. Like, you'll kind of need that capability in these spaces. And even if reliability isn't a primary concern, just the cost of it will become like a things like capacity planning will start becoming a software problem and not just a sort of traditional operations problem. So if you had to pick those, it would be those three things that probably are the main indicators. Your mileage may vary, I think, is the final bit to that, though. Does that all make sense?
It does for me, and especially maybe on the last one. It's an interesting point, because just to reiterate, if I understand this correctly, if you have a system that needs to scale because, let's say, you're building this cool next generation Facebook or whatever it is, right? And it all of a sudden starts to get very popular. And in order to scale, you have two options. You either hire as many new people as you need to scale up your hardware, or you actually start figuring out how you can automate everything around the operational aspect and the resiliency aspect. So because you cannot just scale with manpower as you need to scale your software. Did I get this right?
This is it, and again, like that's the concept we talk about is the pyramids of reliability, which again is in the book, so you can look at that in more detail. But I guess the concept is we've seen, reliability when I was younger. I'm a little bit older now, and certainly when I first started working in IT, like I was looking after old school Unix machines like Sun Microsystems. Some people will remember those days. And you could just get bigger ones. Like it wasn't really, it was a money problem, but you could just go buy like an E25 and you would just get 100 boards and all the RAM you wanted. It just cost you a lot of money, but you could buy a larger service. So we did that as an industry for a while. And then eventually we ran out of vertical scaling. And so, this model, while still effective in some scenarios, creates problems for internet-facing services where there are millions or billions of users. And immediately you start thinking about how we scale out. And that scale-out mode of operation is where SRE kind of shines, and where reliability concerns become software predominantly, as opposed to operations and sort of stacking reliability on top of like stronger hardware. So, I think sometimes people say, "Oh, well, which one do I need to choose?" And it's really finding the right way for you and your company. But if you start mixing and matching those models, if you cross the streams of the reliability pyramids and you start doing scale out on expensive hardware or scale up on unreliable hardware, that's when it gets very, very difficult to manage your reliability concerns. And you will then start thinking about some of these things, right? Like you will start looking at these concerns of your scale out architectures with some of the techniques that we've seen work in this space. That makes sense.
It does, and I remember in Boston, and I'm sure you had the same question also in. By the way, where was the SRE Con in EMEA?
It was in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam, yeah.
So it's been a long time since I went. The last time I was in Amsterdam was 2011. I did the Amsterdam Marathon. So that feels like a long time ago now.
You did the marathon?
Still a very fun place. I did 26 miles, which was a very long way.
What was can I ask what time did you have?
5.5 hours. 5.5
hours, yeah. But making it, I have never done a marathon.
Which is the most important part.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I'm curious, if he said 12 hours, what would you have said?
I would have said, I have never finished a marathon, so he achieved something I've never achieved. And I think just getting through it is amazing.
Nice answer.
It's a valuable lesson.
See, this is part of that culture. This is that part of that culture you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is being accepting and safe.
Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly.
Great example of Andy. I tried to put you on the spot and I failed as a wise ass. So what am I going to do? I'm the problem here.
So Amsterdam and Boston, I remember in Boston, because you talked about the pyramid. I think in Boston you actually asked the question. I think it was something like, "Can you build a 99.99% service on a 99.9% infrastructure?"
Yeah.
Did you ask the same question in Amsterdam as well?
We did, and again, I think the complexity of this is that sometimes what's intuitive for people is not perhaps realistic. So sometimes people are like, well, how on earth can you build something more reliable and something less reliable? And we're like, well, the classic is RAID arrays. If you haven't built a RAID array, you're using one. Like you may not know it, but like a RAID array takes your disks, which are very unreliable. I used to run a storage team. Like, we lost a lot of disks. There's two types of hard disks, right? Dead or dying. And so you don't have a choice there. You have to make a more reliable storage system on top of that. And that's what we mean when we say that you're gluing together unreliable infrastructure components to make a reliable service. That's exactly what RAID does. Now, does that mean that every service needs to look like that, or every part of infrastructure needs to look like that? Like, that's not really what we're saying, that you can always do this or you should always do this. But we're saying it's possible. And I think sometimes people don't want to look through that from a reliability perspective, because it creates software and people complexity. But it is certainly possible.
Also, I can encourage everyone to check out. I mean, again, we will also, if it's okay for you, to link to the SRE material, the slides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything from the SRE stuff is open access. So that talk will be published, I think, in a few weeks. But again, the slides are up, and these aren't designed to sort of, I think, trick people in terms of saying like, oh, well, you said I can't build this service in this way. I think what we're just trying to explore is the choices you make in your architecture often have, trade-offs, like benefits and concerns, but you can make active choices around reliability with all of the other good things, with cost and scale and, like people, like all those things can factor in. You just got a few choices to make, and these have impacts in that. And for a lot of teams, this especially in the operations space, this seems like old news. Like, this is something you're like, well, everyone knows this. Like, of course, this is obvious how you build these services. For a lot of developers, this isn't an interesting area, right? And kind of why should it be? So they often don't know this until it bites them. And I'm not here to shame them into that. I'm here to explain it. Like, here's how it works. Here's why it works. Here's how we do it like this. So I think that's the important bit, is just understanding some of these models and making them as simple to understand as possible.
And I think there's nothing wrong about repeating things that we think should be common knowledge. I mean, Brian, we talked about this a lot, right? We've been talking about performance problem patterns over the last 5 years since we've doing the podcast. We always bring up the same patterns because they're still out there, like the N+1 query problem, which is our old-time favorite.
Our old favorite,
Yeah, it is what it is. And I think, one of the reasons is, you said developers might not be interested in, but we have to understand, and you said it earlier, we're all not getting younger, but we are getting older. There's new generations coming into our field. Some of them might not be trained engineers. Some of them may now, with COVID, make a career change, right? And they are obviously on a fast track trying to get into our industry. And how should we expect from somebody that gets a couple of months, maybe online education or however they get educated, how should they know everything we've learned I don't know, I was in a specialized high school for 5 years on software engineering. What I learned in 5 years, I don't expect people to learn in 2 months on YouTube. And then obviously with the years and years of experience that you and Brian and I have in the field, we obviously know things, and we should never take it for granted that everybody knows it. That's why it's so important that we do podcasts like this, where even simple things that we take for granted and we think everybody should know might not be known.
Yeah.
For sure. And there's always, I guess, an XKCD for it. And my favorite one in this one is the Diet Coke and Mentos. So like the idea is, like, for everything that you think everyone knows, there's millions of people born like in the US every year. So there's thousands of people for whom like their first day of knowing about, like, someone on this, like, listening to this podcast is like, what do you mean Diet Coke and Mentos? It's amazing. Go to the store, go start that science experiment. Don't shame people for not knowing about it. Go enjoy it. Go find out about those things.
So basically what you're saying
if you
is,
don't know what this is, so I'm going to say, if you don't know what this is, go get a bottle of Coke, go into the fancy room in your house with like the white couch and all that, put the bottle of Coke in there on the floor there, and drop some Mentos in. Your parents will love you for it. That's going to be really cool. And they'll say, wow, you're a budding scientist, so how could we be mad? Right, exactly. Sorry, Andy, you were saying.
Oh, that's perfect. I was just I was going down the line because you say go into a store and just try it out there, and you probably will never allow back into that store in the future.
I would say like there's a lawyer cat moment here, or I should, be like, right, this advice, you follow it your own. Your own. Find someone who knows about this and get them to help you with this journey.
If you listen to advice from me, that's the problem.
Uh-huh.
Often as a tech industry, I think sometimes we do have like very prescriptive ideas about how things should operate. And we don't realize how much of that is not always obvious or consumable. And the more we can make things like simple and consumable, reduce the cognitive load. We've gone through the full stack phase, right? Like it sounds great, like being a full stack developer and knowing everything about everything, but it's not proven possible. Like the idea that we can have someone who's I think this was Charity who said this, like, if you're not updating the website and designing the computer chips, are you even a full stack engineer? It's like, well, how can you do all these things? Like, it's not feasible. So we need to provide this guidance as part of our platforms, part of our like team capabilities, and do that in as simple a way as possible. Make these things more accessible.
I think that's where a lot of that culture comes in, right? Because if you're not going to be a full stack engineer probably. So you have to have that culture where the people who do know the hardware side or the operation side are sharing and accepted for sharing. Same to the developers and back and forth, and knowledge is being shared in common. We talk about repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And it's amazing how many times when, we're talking to a client, they've picked some technology to run their important stack on. It's like, well, why'd you pick that? Well, we were told to move to Kubernetes. Right? All right, well, did you figure out how you're going to observe it? Did you figure out how you're going to maintain it? Did you figure out how you're going to like, no, we just moved. And the idea being you make these decisions based on requirements, needs, and the ability to do all the things you need to do, including considering SRE, considering security, considering all the different elements, and then says what model matches our needs. And then that's the one you pick, right? But it's still... This is one of the things I think, Andy, just like the N+1 query problem, that struggle is going to go on and on and on and on forever. So these ideas of sharing these concepts over and over and over again are key to getting past that. Well, never getting past it, but just key to keeping it on people's minds so that less and less people do that over time. And, it's not a struggle. Hey, now we want to start SRE. Great. We're starting way behind now because we have all these other problems, as opposed to we're in a good spot to now introduce. Speaking of that, though, I wanted to ask, when moving to SRE, you had those 3 points you made earlier. First project, our first foray into SRE, we're going to put together the team. We're going to start experimenting and working it out. What makes a good candidate for an application, or, is there any general guidance on where you should start? Right? Obviously, if you're doing cloud transformation, you're not going to start with your critical app, right? You're going to experiment with something lesser. What's a good advice for trying it?
Yeah, and I think this isn't a checklist problem or a checklist solution, I guess. Like there's no sort of, hey, follow these boxes and it will tell you the one. But I do think that there is some pretty clear guidance that we've tried to give in the book, which is, don't start with the most important thing in your company. If there's an existential thing that if it goes down and everything stops running and that's the end of your company, maybe don't practice on that first. Like you can, but we've seen people struggle with that, like practicing on those things. So you build up capabilities in anything, and the same way you build up SRE capabilities. So regardless of how good people are in terms of their SRE background or knowledge, if they come into a new environment, they'll start thinking like, well, how does it work in this context? How do I understand this environment? And this will take you some time, and give it time is also a good, I think, idea on this. So, the concept of let's parachute some people in, give them 3 months, we're expecting much higher reliability. That's not a safe place to start. So starting somewhere where you can give yourself a good runway and say like, hey, I'm really need more reliability for the service, and let's take a year or so to try and make that improvement. So, we've talked as Google, right, that it takes teams inside Google to move a level of reliability to move like another 9. It can take them years for services. and they're often pretty good at it. So if you're starting from scratch, like, don't set yourself up to fail by picking the most important thing that's super critical. Don't pick your leave booking system either, right? Don't pick something that's non-critical, that no one really worries about if it's down. Like do that sort of medium-sized service first. Try and make sure it ticks those boxes, that there is some level of reliability as a differentiator, that it has some scale to it. Like that will get you most value in these spaces. And be prepared for that learning journey to be just like the DevOps folks, like cyclical. Like, you'll try stuff, you'll learn, you'll build a bit more of a platform, you'll build some capabilities around that, and then the next one will be slightly easier. And if you've built the learning of the first one into the second one, each one gets easier and easier, your platform grows, and you build up those capabilities for your company and services. And that gives you that sort of positive reinforcement loop. You're going to get setbacks, and this is the other side as well. I think we talk about sometimes people do ask for SRE implementations without failures, or they're like, oh, I like taking risks, but I don't really want to take risks for this. You can't avoid that. In your production environment, like, things are happening. Like, it's not, you can't, there's no such thing as a risk-free production environment. Like, the risks are occurring irrelevant of how you view that. And it's sometimes, I think, being realistic about risk taking is, these things are happening anyway. Like, if you're in security, I think you have the same problems. People are trying to attack your systems on the internet. Like, that's a reality to it. So you're not coming from it from a blank slate. You're saying, like, what's my current state? Can I make it better? Can I make improvements in there? How do I do the smallest amount of things that would make improvements? Learn and then iterate in this. So I think those are the key things. There's probably a couple of other factors that help. If you're not doing cloud, and I understand I work for a cloud provider, so I'm not going to push cloud, but I am going to tell you that SREs will struggle to do scale out on automated infrastructure if you don't have scale out automated infrastructure. So whether it's cloud, like a public cloud, or this private cloud, but whatever it is, if you're not having scale out automated infrastructure, your SREs are going to start building that, because how else do they do scale out automation? So be prepared that you have a bit of a cloud journey, whether public, private, whichever vendor. That's not what I'm saying, but be prepared that those scale out pieces will need to happen, or they'll need to be built. And then I think the other one is, what's the existing, what's the path dependence that you have in some of these spaces? Do you have an existing DevOps journey? Have you done a lot of cool stuff in that space? We think you'll find it easier if you've made a lot of progress in your DevOps journey to do things like SRE. Like, there's a lot of overlap. We think reliability is a key concern for the DevOps space. You can read some of the DORA reports in this. It's some evidence-based views of this. If you're not doing that, that's not necessarily a problem, but be prepared. You might have to do some of those, silo breaking, for instance, might be more challenging when you haven't done that already, basically. So there's a couple of other factors in there. So it sounds like a lot, but there's really 4 or 5 key things there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
James, I got 2 or 3 other questions that I would like to ask. The first one that I keep getting more and more from organizations, especially nowadays, that we all know that the economic climate may not be as nice anymore as it used to be. And so people are asking, so what's the ROI on all of this? What's the ROI on actually moving to the cloud? What's the ROI on setting up a new SRE team? What's the ROI on DevOps? Do you have an answer for this? Like, how do you argue for that?
Yeah. So, we talk about this deliberately. Part of the book, and when we talked about it at Boston for DevOps Day. So, one of the primary reasons for doing SRE at Google was cost. Steve, who was working at Google in that sort of early years, talked about it. From a practical perspective, there's no way that you can scale by just adding humans to server administration. So we shouldn't shy away from the idea that SRE is very effective at cost reduction at scale. That's one of the key reasons we still do it. So sublinear scaling is a core part of the SRE approach. You don't have to do that. Like, when Google doesn't mandate how you do these kind of things, and that's for a good reason. But But if you're looking for cost savings, we think sublinear scaling is a great cost saving. The people that you need to operate are lower than the growth rate of your company. Like that's our plan, and it's an open one. Like we're not secret about it. We're like, we think sublinear scaling is one of the key areas. Where that gets problematic, and I think where we've tried to help people understand this is often there are global benefits to that reliability in terms of your company. So things like reputational damage. If something goes wrong and your website is down, there's reputational damage. Like that's not necessarily a shock to anyone, but the disadvantages, like the negatives of that, accrue to your whole company. The benefits may be hard to understand in an ROI calculation, and especially if you're running a cost center where you're saying like, well, hey, reliability it costs us this much. Trying to make that local global trade-off in terms of your budgeting and understanding of how this works, that's where most of the problems occur. Like if you can keep the global view of SRE and reliability matched up with the spend, you'll find this much, much easier. And we know this from customers who sort of keep that in mind. That may require an executive sponsor to keep those things balanced, someone who is concerned about that global impact and cost. The closer you try and keep that local optimization of cost, the harder it gets for reliability as well as SRE. So don't shy away from that cost angle, but just be super cognizant that you might not get those cost saves in like a very narrow local space. They have to be done as an ROI calculation for your whole business. And that's what I think a lot of companies have done. So we know that you can do cost savings. Keep those factors in mind. That makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I can also just point people again to the chapters in the book and also in your presentation, as you mentioned. I know I'm pointing on my side here. It doesn't make sense for the people that are listening to this, but
they don't know you're pointing.
Exactly. But just people visualize, I point to my other screen.
I can feel the enthusiasm though, which is the most important part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cost optimization is global, not local. SRE is a strategic investment in long-term operational efficiencies. There's a lot of interesting pieces in the slides.
The bit we find interesting as well is often I have this conversation with people. I'm like, do you have executive sponsorship? And they're like, yes, of course. Reliability is a huge concern for us. And I'm like, fantastic. Who's your chief reliability officer? Who's the executive who looks after it? And they're like, we don't need one. There's no need for one because it's so important. And I'm like, but you have a CISO, right? You have because security is important, but you have a CISO. And they're like, well, of course we have a CISO. Hang on. If you have a CISO, why don't you have a chief reliability officer? That's often an awkward question, right? It's often, the person who could wrap up all of your reliability costs and calculations and ROI, just like your CISO does in your security space. That's often a person who exists, but often they don't have the recognition or the title. Very few people seem to be called chief reliability officers. Like we haven't really seen that in the wild, but we've seen plenty of people who are like an executive in charge of reliability. And we're like, fantastic. This is the person to talk about your costs and benefits with at that global level. We've had that person in Google, in terms of Ben Traynor for a long time. And we've never really changed that model. So we have no other way of measuring this. So that's just our opinion, really. But I guess the companies where we've seen it be successful do tend to have executive sponsorship. And when that executive sponsorship kind of wanes, that's also when the reliability and some of these cost calculations just get deprioritized. So that's a good indicator that you can make changes in this space with prioritization at senior levels of your company. It does, however, indicate there might be a bit of a ceiling on your grassroots SRE efforts, like a grass ceiling, for want of a better word, where you will need some sponsorship to do things. And I just think that's the same as security, right? Like if you don't have that in security, you always struggle to get good security outcomes. So I don't see why reliability is any different.
That was the same pattern we saw in for DevOps too. The people who were successfully transitioning had executive buy-in, and those who didn't had a long uphill battle, and some fell apart. Some would do a grassroots effort and then catch somebody's attention. But if you start with that executive buy-in. That was our approach. Our CTO said, get a release out in, what was it, 10 minutes or 30 minutes? Whatever it was.
We had a fast lane. We needed to be able to react to any problem within an hour and get the fix out. And prior to that, it took us, the classical 2 weeks sprints. And then that was the idea. Yeah, that was years ago.
But it's that enablement. It's funding the budget. It's keeping track and helping justify the budget, right? Because that's one thing everyone's learning now, as Andy brought up, is that we got the budget for everything, but now it's accountability time. So if you have someone who knows how to pull in that accountability, which, oh, great, I want to be the CRO. I wouldn't know how to look at budgets and put all that stuff together. So you need someone who knows that stuff to do it. Great point. Fantastic point there.
These things are also that they seem like they're not technical concerns, but I think we do encourage people to not look at their jobs through this narrow lens of like, well, this is my technical element to it. Like, we're all here for like business benefit. We're all here because we want our companies to be successful. We want these good outcomes for the overall business, and that's, I guess, in modern DevOps terms, right? Like I don't want to version out DevOps, but like where DevOps started and I guess where it is today, like we talk a lot more about business outcomes, and we shouldn't shy away from that. Like, we should embrace that. It doesn't mean your executives should be telling you exactly what to do in terms of like deployments, but they should be giving you those goals which are well aligned with these outcomes, and we shouldn't shy away from it.
Well, yeah, I mean, even just simply, what are you building reliability for? Your customers, right? That's the whole point, right? So that's, yes, I have this technical job, but in the end of the day, it's all to serve whoever my end customer might be. And if I'm not,
we're always doing
it
for a reason. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then maybe also to add one more thing, and I'm looking on the slides here. In terms of the ROI, you were quoting the State of DevOps report, where it says reliability is a force multiplier. Teams that excel at reliability engineering are 1.8 times more likely to meet or exceed organizational goals. I guess that's a nice slide to put in front of your.
There's a reason. I'll swiftly plug the State of DevOps report. Like, I know it's produced. Google owns Dora, so there's a conflict of interest there, but I also think you can look at other DevOps reports, right? Like, they'll try and tell you similar things. We do think that based on the data that we have, that there is a strong correlation between software performance and business outcomes. That's why we try and do these things. That's why we want companies to do these things. We want those better business outcomes. What we found when we're asking people about reliability in this space is that if you have a strong correlation between both, and you can look at the report itself for more details, but if you're just doing really strong software development, like that on its own isn't always a good indicator, because sometimes you might be a bit of a feature factory. You might be pushing out releases and they're causing problems, and they're not really working well from an operations perspective. The flip side is true. If you have a reliable system but it can't ever get updated, that's not helping your business necessarily move forward, right? Like, so the combination of the two seems to be the secret sauce, where and I guess this isn't necessarily new news for some of the DevOps teams, but I think it's worth repeating for many teams. Try and get that balance where you are getting the right amount of releases to the right amount of reliability concerns. And if you do that, companies that do that seem to have much higher performance. So there's a strong correlation in those spaces.
To write this down. Yeah, it's awesome.
So, people often ask, like, where's the money? And I'm like, well, here it is. Like, you want higher business outcomes. This is it. This is why we try and do this. And here's the piece. Yeah. I think what gets difficult in complex adaptive systems is people often want to isolate and change one part of it. And that's not how complex systems work. Complex systems require you to look at the current state, the path dependence, like where a company has come from, where it's going towards, and then try and influence and nudge that in different directions. So it's not as simple as just saying like, okay, we need twice as many releases. Like, that's one change in the wider ecosystem, but it won't necessarily have the same outcome each time, because again, it depends on where you've come from. So trying to say, hey, we do want faster change, but we want it at the right pace of the reliability levels, that's I think an important thing when it comes to changing the system. It's not about just sort of doing one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is also one of the things that I mentioned. But the speed of delivery could also be if you just measure yourself based on how fast you can deliver, you may even have a negative impact on the people that are on the receiving end. Your users might be also overwhelmed with it's changing again. I remember, Brian, in the early days when we were kind of speeding up from, remember the two releases per year to then 2 major releases every other week. We had a hard time to actually keep up with educating our internal folks, right, on how to sell the new, because our whole, product development is just one piece of the whole end-to-end chain. Then you have support, then you have sales engineering, you have your customers. So you obviously, it all needs to work in the right balance. And I think that's the nice way. We need to balance everything out. Yeah.
Then you had buttons moving. You're like, where's that? Where do I go to turn that off? Oh, they moved that. Like, where'd it go?
But in the video shows here. Yeah, but the video is 2 weeks old.
Yeah,
2 weeks old. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool.
It was a good growing pain to have, though, right? Because it was, because we adjusted from it. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. James, I have one final question for you, because this is something that comes up a lot in discussions as well. The topic of SLO, service level objectives. And I borrowed one of your quotes into one of my texts that I'm about to present in the meeting after this recording.
He credits you, though.
But yeah, I credit you. Yeah, I have a screenshot of your book. But I say the power of the SLO is driving transformations. And in the book you say, focus on the user and all else will follow. And I like this a lot, because when I started talking about SLOs in the very beginning, I think I had a wrong approach of SLOs, because I thought I need to put SLOs on every single service. I need to define at least 3 to 5 or maybe 10 SLOs. But in the end, this doesn't really make sense. You need to define the SLOs that are aligned with your business objectives, right? Like how many users do you want to have in the system? What should be the availability, your critical end user journeys, or whatever you want to call them. And then I think the rest will follow, because then you will do everything to keep those top level SLOs in check, and which means you are ending up with business success. And then you'll figure out what it means what you need to do in order to support these top level SLOs. My question to you now is, I see you nodding. People don't see that you're nodding, but you're kind of nodding. When people ask you, right, you get approached by a lot of organizations. How do you answer? What do you tell them in terms of where do you start with SLOs?
Again, so it is a very common, I think, question in this space. I don't think there's a nice prescriptive answer. I would say the most common theme I would normally do is start where you are. Like, often people were like, well, tell me what I need to do. And I'm like, start where you are. Like, wherever you are right now, what do you have? Like, what's easy to measure? What's the SLIs that you might have? Or, what are the things in place that you have today? Start there. Like, instead of thinking like, what would be the perfect outcome for my, service in this hypothetical space? You probably won't know the right SLOs until you've explored this space. Like, it's inherently a complex system. So trying to sort of design them up front, trying to say like, hey, if I just got enough SLOs, like this would somehow be okay, that often doesn't really help people in this space. And so thinking of all of these things, SLOs, SLIs, error budgets, as just tools in your toolbox for this space, I think is much more important than the individual metrics. Like, the things that you're trying to sort of say are critical, like, will change over time. They'll change depending on your business, and using them, like I say, like different tools in your toolbox, and starting with, okay, what do we have now, and how do I then increment it, is almost always, I think, where we start. If you think of these tools as mechanisms for communication across silos, like, that's also, I think, a very important takeaway. So an error budget is a way of us saying, hey, I have an understanding of how much reliability I need in my service, and I've agreed that with other parts of my business. the exact number in the error budget isn't the most important part of it. It's the fact that you've made that agreement and there's a shared understanding of what you want. So an SLO is a shared understanding between, yourself, other parts of your business, your customers, of like what they can help normally expect, what they kind of want.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you have that shared understanding is more important than the exact thing itself.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't go on Twitter, folks, and be like, James said SLOs aren't important. Like, that's not what I think we're trying to say. What we're saying is the right SLOs for you will be custom, and you will often not be able to well prepare them in advance. But once you start building them and using that feedback, that negotiation, these proxy metrics that you can use will help you turn some, very speculative ideas into data.
Mm-hmm.
They will start helping you use these tools to make better data-driven decisions, and that will then help you make better choices for your business. It doesn't mean you just have to do these things because we said so. Like, that's not what we're trying to say. They're just tools in the toolbox, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that? It's a complex topic, but does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
It does make sense. Thank you so much. And as Brian and I always say, that the great thing about doing this podcast is because we always learn a lot. And I mean, hopefully our listeners learn a lot as well. But I always I want to say thank you for spending the time with us and giving us your insights, because that's the great thing about the communities that we live in, because we are all open, we share, even though we work for certain organizations and we may want to keep certain things as a secret, but we don't do this. We just share openly, because in the end, we all get better.
Yeah.
It's really the most important part, is that continuous learning.
Exactly. Awesome. I think we consumed a lot of your time. Thank you so much. I really hope I get a chance again to meet you at one of the upcoming talks. Do you have any talks coming up in the next months where people may be able to see you live?
I don't, but if you people want to see Steve McGee, my collaborator in this space, he's presenting this Thursday at All Day DevOps.
Okay.
And we'll be talking about the reliability mapping that we've been trying to do. So come to All Day DevOps, it's a virtual conference, and learn a bit about reliability mapping.
That's good. Awesome.
Brian, I don't think reliability is going away, so we'll be talking about this.
We're just going to stop caring about performance altogether.
Yeah.
When we're robots, still need it. Anyway, and I got nothing else to add. I really appreciate your time, James. Very educational and informative. So thanks for spending the time with us, and thanks for spending the time with our listeners, and thanks to our listeners for being there. And
thanks, folks. Much appreciated.
Yeah, we hope everyone has a fantastic time, and I don't know, doing whatever. I'm a mess today, I guess. I can't even think straight. It's still only it's just turning 10 for me. Anyhow, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time, and bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.